Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today is September 1st, 2018, and like the beginning of every month, I do a 2018 Senate election prediction, and then I will do a governor prediction in a different video. Pretty much looking at our map, we have 35 Democrats already filled in the safe column, 23 which are not up for re-election, and 12 of which I have rated as safe for the Democratic Party. As for the Republicans, they currently have 42 seats not up for re-election and only 4 in the safe column. Obviously, this map does not help the Democrats, mainly because there are currently 10 states that Donald Trump carried in 2016 that currently have Democratic incumbents, so keep that in mind. With 19 contested races, the GOP only needs 4 to retain the majority and 5 to retain where they are at this point in time. On your screen right now is the current composition of the United States Senate. The Republicans currently have the majority with 51 seats, down 1 from 2016, and 49 for the Democrats, of course up 1 from 2016. And pretty much the reason why Republicans need 50 and not 51 is because of Vice President Mike Pence, who's right down here in red, which means that if there is a tie in the United States Senate, it'll likely go to the GOP because it goes to whichever party the Vice President is a part of. In this case, of course, would be the Republican Party. So for right now, again, with these 19 contested races, obviously not all of them are going to be rated as safe for either political party or possibly even close for either political party. Some of them will be ranging in the likely or leaning column, which means it could be 5% to even 15%, but just isn't reaching over that 15% mark to reach the safe column. So many of these races are actually pretty much, I guess you would say, solid for the Democrats. No real possibility of a Republican winning, just that the margins may be a little bit different, and not so much as a 22% lead in polling like we see in Minnesota, but possibly an 8% lead, which would also be a victory for the Democrat, just not in the safe column. So we'll start off with the Rust Belt. This is a key area. This is an area Donald Trump won in 2016, and then we're going to go over and peel off into West Virginia, Virginia, and New Jersey, which all three of those states currently have Democratic incumbents. As for the Rust Belt, actually every one of these states that I'm about to go through has a Democratic incumbent, in this office. Minnesota has a special election Al Franken did resign his position there and was taken over by the former Lieutenant Governor, Tina Smith, who's now the incumbent senator from that seat. Wisconsin has Tammy Baldwin, and we go over to Michigan with Debbie Stabenow, Pennsylvania, Bob Casey, New Jersey, Bob Menendez, Virginia, Tim Kaine, West Virginia, Joe Manchin, Ohio, Sherrod Brown, Indiana, Joe Donnelly. So pretty popular incumbents, to be completely honest with you, especially in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And the main thing to note is that, again, these are 3 states that Donald Trump had carried. Yes, they have Democratic incumbents, but these races really should be getting closer than what they currently are. For example, we'll take the state of Michigan right now. Debbie Stabenow leads by 17.3%. I do not expect her to win by 17.3%, but probably anywhere from 10 to 14%, which is why Michigan goes into the likely column with a lead that tremendous this late in the game with almost 60 days left in the 2018 midterm elections. That's going to be very hard for the GOP to catch up. With around 2 months to go, it's going to be very, very hard. So Michigan's out of the way, but we go over to Wisconsin. So you should see a little bit lesser numbers than Michigan, I guess, because Debbie Stabenow is a little bit more popular in Michigan than Tammy Baldwin is in Wisconsin. However, Wisconsin I'm still going to characterize as a likely Democratic state. Currently, Tammy Baldwin leads by 8.0% statewide, and that's pretty good. Even though Hillary Clinton led by 6.6% on election day, or somewhere around 6%, and Donald Trump was able to win it, that was the only state that was truly incorrect. And Tammy Baldwin's lead has actually been growing, as her approval rating has. So I expect by the end of 2018 that she could actually win this race by over 5%. Even though polling was wrong in Wisconsin, I'm not going to discredit it 100% at the end of 2018, unless it is wrong. In Pennsylvania, right now, Bob Casey leads by 14.8%. That is a huge lead for the Democrat, but I'm not going to put it in the safe column, but I am going to put it in the likely column. So pretty much we've cut off those 3 states that Donald Trump carried in 2016, but Minnesota also has Tina Smith. She's not too popular because she isn't too known, but she also isn't unpopular on the people that do know her. Right now, she leads in opinion polling by 8.4% compared to Klobuchar, which leads by 22%, but I still expect her to win by over 5%, around that 8% margin, compared to Klobuchar, which could likely win by 22% or even more, depending on how the rest of her term goes out. So pretty much we go over to the state of New Jersey. That's a race I actually wanted to point out, because in Wisconsin, the Democrat is actually leading larger in Wisconsin than the Democrat is leading in New Jersey. Keep in mind, New Jersey was a Democratic state in 2016 by a considerable amount, but Wisconsin was a Trump state in 2016. So keep that in mind. At this point in time, I do not see the race narrowing, considering that Bob Menendez is, even though he does have a very low approval rating, I do not see the Republican gaining any ground in the state whatsoever. I think that it will be a close race, but I do not expect it to be down to nearing very low single-digit percentage points. And another thing that's interesting is in West Virginia, Joe Manchin leads by 8.4%. Well, that's not a safe margin. However, it's higher than the Democrat in New Jersey and a number of other states. And West Virginia is a very, very, very Republican state. With one Republican and one Democrat sent from West Virginia to the United States Senate, you would expect that this race possibly could overturn to the GOP, considering how overwhelming the victory was for Donald Trump in that state. Not the case. I expect Joe Manchin to win here, but I'm actually going to put it in the leaning column because I think the race could actually narrow, because I think that Trump will find this area to be somewhere welcoming compared to New Jersey, which I don't think he'll go to, maybe even once, whereas West Virginia will definitely be an area that the Trump campaign would not want to lose. I guess the Trump White House at this point in time, and then we'll lead in 2020, and then we'll call it the Trump campaign. And pretty much we have 46 Republicans, 41 Democrats. So clearly the Democrats have gained a number of seats, not really gained in terms of taking it from the Republicans, but from where they were before. We can go over to the other two Rust Belt states I was going to mention, Ohio and Indiana. Not so much Rust Belt as Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, but just around the general area. Pretty much Ohio and Indiana. Indiana we will come back to because I really want to focus on that one a lot. Whereas Ohio, I'm pretty comfortable characterizing that race as a likely Democratic state. And as crazy as it sounds, Ohio, a state that Donald Trump neared a 10% margin in 2016, the Republican is losing here by a considerable amount. If we look at polling data, Sherrod Brown leads by 15.4%. That is a huge amount. The fact that a Republican is losing worse in Ohio than Pennsylvania is crazy. Ohio went for Trump more than Pennsylvania by around 8 percentage points. The Democrat currently in Ohio has a 1% in terms of voter, has a 1% higher voting base than the Democrat in Pennsylvania. So both of them are going to be rated as likely seats for the Democrats. So those are very interesting numbers. West Virginia, pretty surprising to be 8.4%. As for Indiana, we will come back to it, but I do expect it to get very, very close. That is not going to be a leaning state or likely state or safe state for either political party. It will come down to the less than 1% margin that I am predicting. As for some other Democratic states, Virginia, for one, was won by Hillary Clinton in 2016. Don't expect much for Republicans there. That's pretty much all I can say. Tim Kaine being on the ticket for Hillary Clinton is not going to ruin his popularity in Virginia. Sure, he's not the most popular figure. There's never been truly a popular figure coming out of a presidential election, even our own president. However, Virginia itself is a very Democratic state, especially in this wave election year. Even if it was a Republican wave year, Virginia would still be a swing state. This is not a Bush state. This was a Bush state, actually, but this is not the same state that was won by George Bush. This is not the same state with the same demographics that was won by previous Republicans. Again, in off years, maybe 2013, there was a possibility of a Republican winning the governor's race. In 2014, there was a possibility of the Republican winning the Senate race. But after 2016, and Donald Trump was able to flip 3 Rust Belt states that voted for Obama more than Virginia in both of his elections, somehow still remained in the Democratic column, nearing 5% or around 5%, whereas the Rust Belt went to Trump by less than 1%. It was something to note. Virginia no longer has Republican tendencies, even in the state legislature. In the House of, I believe, delegates, Virginia had a huge overturn in 2017. It went from a Republican supermajority to a majority by 1. So Virginia is a very Democratic state. That's pretty much all I need to say about it. I don't need to keep continuing on a race that isn't too important to the outcome of the United States Senate. We have 43 Democrats, 46 Republicans. Obviously, there are some Republican states. As for the Mississippi special election, I expect that race to be likely for the GOP at the end of 2018. As for Texas, though, that is a race that I do want to talk about pretty considerably. Texas. I'm going to characterize this race, and wait for it, as a lean Republican state. New polling data suggests that Ted Cruz would win the election in 2018 if it was held today by 4.4%, and in the most recent poll by a mere 1%. Yes, it could be an outlier, but it's also showing a trend. Ted Cruz has consistently gone down in every new opinion poll taken, and it's not good news for his campaign. I don't expect him to win by 1%, but I expect the margin to be less than 5% at this point in time. Beto O'Rourke is definitely gaining on that Republican presence in the state of Texas, and changing demographics don't help either, and the mild popularity of the president doesn't necessarily help either. Yes, the president currently has a high approval rating in Texas compared to where he does in the Rust Belt or Ohio or Nevada. Pretty much in Texas, he's higher than he is in many parts of the country that Donald Trump actually carried. However, Texas is still a state that could get closer in future election years. We are seeing something different from Texas. I don't think people truly realize the whole effect of it. Many political pundits expect Texas to be a blue state by 2024. So my screen recorder cut out, but we're going to pretty much continue on. I just discussed Texas and why it's a leaning Republican state. Overall, just Ted Cruz, yes, he's mildly popular, But Beto O'Rourke is definitely bringing up the polling numbers, and Ted Cruz has consistently declined in polling numbers. In fact, the most recent poll shows him ahead by a mere 1%. I don't expect him to win by 1%. I do expect him to win, but I think it will be less than 5% just based off changing demographics, the Democratic wave year, and also a number of other factors that definitely influence not just Texas, but other parts of the country, which is why areas that Donald Trump did very well in right now, I mean, in 2016, currently have been rated as for the Democrat, for example, West Virginia or Ohio or Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin, and that's not the only ones that are going to be on this list. So we have 43 Democrats and 48 Republicans. Where else can the Republicans win? Well, we have a couple of states, but I'm not going to mention them just yet because it's a lot different than where I've been characterizing a number of these races from, I guess, for months. I mean, this one particular state I've always characterized as a state for a single political party, but now I am possibly going to move that one into another political party's column. So for right now, we have, again, 43 Democrats, 48 Republicans. No change in terms of gains for either the GOP or the Democrats, but we can go over to Montana. That state right now currently shows John Tester leading by 5.5% statewide. I expect Montana to still be a leaning Democratic state. Matt Rosedale is not the best GOP candidate. They could have fielded, but he is the candidate they did field. And right now, Montana, even though it is a heavy Republican state, John Tester is pretty popular. Do not underestimate John Tester in that state. He beat a Republican incumbent, and yes, it was a Democratic wave year, but what year is this? And Montana is probably going to stay in the column for the Democrats based off John Tester's popularity alone. If this was an open seat, I would have seen this race go to the GOP. But for right now, Montana is going to stay in the leaning Democratic column, and we're not seeing any data that shows otherwise. So with 44 Democrats, we can go over to North Dakota. So this is a state that people really want to focus on. This is a huge possibility for the GOP to win in. Right now, Kevin Cramer, the sole representative from North Dakota, leads by 0.5%. This is a state that went for Heidi Heitkamp in 2012. But keep in mind, 2012 was a Barack Obama presidential election year. But you can't say that she did ride on his coattails. This is North Dakota. Mitt Romney won North Dakota. He didn't win North Dakota by a narrow margin. He won it by over 10%, in double digits. To be completely honest about this, North Dakota is a Republican state. However, she was able to win in the United States Senate race in 2012, and it was against a sole representative who gave up the seat to run in the United States Senate, and North Dakota remained in the Democratic column. However, Kevin Cramer leads by 0.5% again. However, the Republican in 2012 led in opinion polling on Election Day. But at this point in time, with a number of things, I guess Heidi Heitkamp not being too popular at this point in time, North Dakota, I'm going to narrowly, very narrowly, I mean less than 1% narrowly, go to put it in the GOP column. And that puts North Dakota our first tilt of the evening. With the Republicans one away from a majority, where can they get this final seat that solidifies their majority with Vice President Mike Pence? And all eyes turn towards Florida. Right now, Florida shows Rick Scott leading by 1.2% statewide. That is a pretty considerable amount, considering that political candidates in presidential election years typically win the state by narrow margins. Bill Nelson last won the state of Florida by over 10% in his last Senate race, but that's not likely what we are going to see in this race itself. Rick Scott is a popular GOP governor. Also, Bill Nelson is a popular Democratic senator. Legislating is different than governing a state. However, he is still doing very well, referring to Rick Scott, in terms of opinion polling. Right now, leading by 1.2% statewide is not a good sign for the Democrat. A Democrat should have the power of the incumbency, considering he is the incumbent, and Bill Nelson also isn't campaigning too well either. Rick Scott is known across the state. This is not some unknown GOP candidate just randomly winning the primary. This is a popular incumbent governor. Rick Scott's popularity is higher than Bill Nelson's popularity. But for right now, Florida, even though Rick Scott typically underperforms, even in Republican wave years, it could also be the fact that Florida is a swing state. Even in a Democratic wave year, we're not going to see Bill Nelson win by 10%. We're not going to see the Democratic candidate in the governorship, the gubernatorial election win by 10%. Florida is still a swing state at heart. Blue wave year, red wave year, or whatever year, Florida will still be a swing state. So for right now, Florida, I'm going to narrowly land in the GOP column, in the tilt column, making it the second state going into our tilt column this evening. So the Republicans officially have the majority. But I left a number of these states out for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Democrats are going to win New Mexico. We'll get to that in a second. As for a number of other these states, the Democrats are possibly going to win here either. But there is one state I want to bring attention to in just a moment. I'm not going to bring attention to it just yet, but it is a state that is going to be talked about for a while, not just by me, but by many others. So for right now, New Mexico goes into the likely Democratic column with new opinion polling, but in a future prediction, if more polling comes out, I'm likely going to move that one into the safe column and not characterize it at all during the video. So we have 45 Democrats, 50 Republicans. Let's go over to Nevada. That is a state that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. And, it's a little bit surprising to see the Democrat leading here by narrow margins. Donald Trump actually led in opinion polling in Nevada on the end of the 2016 presidential election. He was expected to win Nevada, but didn't. So you could say that the Democrats are pretty much underestimated here. But for right now, Jackie Rosen leads by 0.6%. That is not a good margin for Democrats, but it's enough for me to characterize this race as a tilt Democratic state, especially with the unpopularity of Dean Heller from the state of Nevada. As for Indiana, Missouri, and Tennessee, these are three states that are pretty Republican states. All of them voted for Donald Trump by double digits, and the highest state was Tennessee. However, only two of these states have Democratic incumbents, Indiana and Missouri. The reason why Tennessee is a toss-up state is because the former popular, might I add, Democratic governor is running for the Senate race here against Marsha Blackburn. So right now, Tennessee, even though it is a Republican state, could show signs of an overturn for the Democratic Party, and it likely will. As for the state of Tennessee, Bredesen leads by 1.6%. Nothing to be 100% proud about. But a Democrat leading in Tennessee is something to note. The fact that Tennessee is still a Republican state and does have a possibility of electing a Democratic senator is also something to note as well. But Tennessee, for right now, I'm actually going to characterize as a tilt Democratic state. And I'm going to get a lot of heat for that, regardless of how I characterize that race. But for right now, I do expect a narrow Bredesen victory. And a lot of people want to point out primary turnout. Well, Tennessee is a Republican state. Do not expect Republicans to flip to the Democratic Party, deregister themselves as under the GOP, re-register themselves as a Democrat, just to vote in a closed primary for their candidate. If they know the candidate is going to win the Democratic nomination, they would likely just vote in the GOP primary just to exercise their right to vote, especially since there was a contested GOP primary. Not many Republicans, even if they are voting for president in the general election, are going to vote in the Democratic primary as a Democrat. That's just not how things are. The fact that the Republicans did have, an overwhelming majority of primary voters doesn't mean a lot in terms of a safe Republican state or safe Democratic state. When it comes down to it, swing states are truly the only states that really matter in terms of swing states in terms of party affiliation. So West Virginia, for example, is a safe Republican state on the presidential level, but in terms of party affiliation is a swing state. So Florida, another swing state, or I guess you could say Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, a number of these states where primary turnout definitely does matter, and if it doesn't match what we saw in 2016, it's also something to note. But for right now, Tennessee goes in the tilt Democratic column. And we'd already characterized Nevada, but there's another state over there I've yet to characterize, and that is the state of Arizona. But I do want to come back to it. Indiana right now, Joe Donnelly actually leads by 6.5%, and that's because of a very, very, very skewed poll that recently came out. He leads by 12% in that poll. I don't think he's going to win by 12%. I don't think anyone expects him to win by 12%. But I do expect him to gain a little bit more ground in terms of opinion polling. Mike Braun is pretty much a repeat of Donald Trump, just not as good as Donald Trump in terms of getting out people to vote. I expect Donnelly to narrowly edge out this election just with the power of the incumbency and also his popularity not being too bad. He's actually higher here than the president in Indiana. The only reason why this race is actually getting a little bit closer is because of the good GOP candidate that the GOP did draft into this race. However, Donnelly likely could change the tide of this election and put it in the Democratic column very narrowly, though. I'm not expecting a blowout for either candidate, even if the GOP does win in the state. So for right now, Indiana goes into the leaning Democratic column, actually tilt Democratic column. As for Missouri, that's another state I'm going to characterize as a tilt Democratic state. And that may seem a little weird. However, Missouri, if you take away all the other opinion polls that weren't taken in terms of in favor of the Republicans or the Democrats, Claire McCaskill leads by 1%. Right now, Josh Hawley leads by 0.2%. So pretty much there's a huge difference there. The Democrat leads without biased polls, and then the GOP leads with all the polls combined. So right now, Claire McCaskill I actually think could narrowly win this race, especially with her performance in 2012. She's gotten very lucky with very bad candidates on the GOP side, and Josh Hawley is no exception to that bad characterization under GOP candidates. But here's the big one. Arizona. So as we all know, John McCain recently passed away. And as unfortunate as that is, do not expect political PACs to not use that death in the favor of the GOP. I mean, capitalizing on his legacy, using the pity vote to get voters out for the GOP. It's something that is going to be used, especially with John McCain's seat possibly being vacated. That could also scare Republicans into just voting Republican, even if they may not support the president, just for the heck of it. And getting a GOP senator in there right now, even with Kyrsten Sinema leading by 5.4%, no new polling has come out since John McCain's death. And once new data does come out, it's going to be completely reanalyzed. The effect of this is definitely going to help the GOP. There's going to be someone who's going to use this in the favor of getting Martha McSally elected. And as unfortunate as that is, nobody should be using a death for political purposes, but it does happen. So Arizona, even though this race has been always rated as a Democratic state for months by me, I'm actually going to put this state in the tilt Republican column for the first time in a long time. And until new data comes out that suggests otherwise to my prediction here, Arizona is actually going to remain in the Republican column, giving the Republicans the exact same majority they have at this point in time. So this map isn't too beneficial to the GOP. They're not gaining any seats when Donald Trump won 10 of these states that currently have Democratic incumbents. But it's not too good for the Democrats either. They didn't gain any seats either, but they were able to hold it off. Right now, with this map, they should have lost a number of seats. Imagine if Hillary Clinton was president. The Republicans could near a 62% filibuster-proof majority. But for right now, they only have 51, the same number they have now, just in a couple of other states. Florida now filled in all red, Arizona filled in all red, Nevada filled in all blue, North Dakota all red, Tennessee with a little bit more blue. So still a little bit change in terms of where the Democrats and the Republicans are getting their candidates from and their senators from, but still the same in terms of party composition. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.